John Gormley. So you just heard from Solomon Partners in Toronto, Ray Goldie, who is a little measured. I mean, he said, sure, there could be some issues in potash, but he is not a guy who appears to have his hair on fire running for the exits, as has been a lot of the media commentary with all of these developments going on in Russia. Premier Brad Wall in Saskatchewan watching things. Premier, you look obviously at what the government makes up in revenues from potash royalties. What do these developments mean?
Well, it's part of it, John. We also look at the economic equation, and I think it's important to point out that in the Potash Corporation of Saskatchewan has come out publicly and said, look, the expansions underway are going to continue. The analyst you just had on referenced the fact that he believes BHP would continue in constructing the largest mine in the world. There's another one that we haven't heard from the company yet, K+S out of Germany, that I think people would remain hopeful about because they currently have mines in Germany that are depleting in terms of a resource. They need to replace production, and they've been very good to deal with as well. They were actually here in the 70s and basically were run out of town because the NDP government at the time was nationalizing mines, one mine in particular. So the economic piece is important. That's jobs for Saskatchewan families. The other one, though, is the revenue to government. It's very important for us to remember that out of all the revenues we have annually budgeted for this year, only 5% will come from potash royalties. And so if there's a reduction in price, that's going to have an impact. But it's going to be manageable, especially considering oil revenues are higher than we budgeted, and not insignificantly so. And the dollar's a little lower than we budgeted, and that actually is good for our budgeting as well. So things are tighter. We're going to watch the spending like we have in the past, but we will have a balanced budget, one of the only ones in North America. We also, of course, have kept a rainy day fund, so to speak, of about $500 million. It's closer to $700 million now, and we have extra dollars in there to drive infrastructure investment. So two pieces are jobs and the fiscal state, the revenue to the government. And on both counts, I think we need to be measured. We need to stay calm and realize that 2009, frankly, was much worse than this, and we came through that strong. One last point. We do hear a lot of people seemingly pushing the panic button, and even our opposition, the NDP, I think Mr. Broughton talking about a royalty review, effectively talking about increasing royalties. Well, that would be a chill for the industry and not good for Saskatchewan families who depend on those jobs, as we all do, in the potash industry. So I think we need to be measured. We'll watch the government spending, certainly. We're continuing to promote other sectors of the economy. Agriculture is strong. Oil, of course, is strong. We're diversifying, as you know, to the knowledge economy in an increasing fashion. But I think we need to be calm in our reaction to what we're hearing out of Russia and Belarus.
Premier Brad Wall. So on the issue of royalties, though, Jack Mintz from the University of Calgary has talked about their complexity. You've mentioned that royalty reviews effectively happen every year when you make the budget anyway. But is there time for and a place for a discussion on having a more consistent royalty structure?
Well, what I said publicly, and this dates back to prior to the last election, is that as we have new entrants into the industry, and notwithstanding this news out of Belarus and Russia, we are going to have new entrants. I believe, there's projects going ahead. We've already talked about that in this interview. But as we have more production, we're going to need to make sure that our royalty structure is balanced between production, between volume and price. Mr. Goldie was touching a little bit on that balance. Right now, it's very biased towards price. And so even if there's a lot of potash being sold, the revenues to government and the people of Saskatchewan don't go up in a commensurate way. We also have to remember, though, that the NDP brought in, supported by the Saskatchewan Party under Mr. Calvert now, some effective incentives to get the expansions happening here. And so while the potash formula might be complex because of that, it is stable today. The royalties, I should say. They are stable today. And now we have our opposition calling for a review today, increases in royalties today. And again, at a time of instability, certainly, I think that we need to avoid that. We need to stay the course, but in the long term, look to balance the royalties between volume and price. And we've signaled to the companies quite publicly that would be a priority of our government moving forward.
Premier Brad Wall, okay, before I let you go, I know I've caught you on the road here. We've been talking, in fact, I know it's on our radio station, there are ads running for the whole discussion on the West-East Energy East pipeline. What do you know in terms of the Saskatchewan government's involvement? What is our position on starting to develop this pipeline more expeditiously toward the east?
we've been working closely with TransCanada Pipeline. We've been supportive of Premier Redford and Premier Alward of New Brunswick, and then Marois' administration in Quebec of them working together to get this to happen. Arguably, as I said earlier this week on the show, I think this has a bigger impact on our oil production than other pipelines, though they're all important for us. It'll move Saskatchewan oil east. It'll result in investments for the pipeline here. We have a good relationship with TransCanada. I think they would say the same thing. We're working with them on it, and I think today they're announcing basically the green light for the next phase of this. So very good news for our economy, maybe a nice time for it, frankly. Very good news for the oil industry, but investment for the province as a result of the pipeline and the movement of Saskatchewan oil east so that we get the Tidewater and we can get a better return for the people's resource.
What's the timeline on that pipeline?
I still think as it gets through Quebec, it's a bit debatable, but it's a much shorter timeline than obviously Keystone, yet to be approved, or Gateway, which is held up still in British Columbia politics. And this is the next phase going ahead, so I don't have an exact time for you, but it's much shorter than the prospect for other pipelines, certainly.
Premier Wall, appreciate you checking in this morning. We'll keep in touch.
Have a good day, John. Thanks.
You too, Premier Brad Wall.